Open the podcast bay door as hell.
And welcome to episode 43 of Welcome to Geektown. I'm your host, Kurt Onstead. I've been a proud geek all my life, being into role-playing games, board games, sci-fi, fantasy, and especially superheroes and comics. And I want to help others join me in those pursuits, but I've found that sometimes people can get overwhelmed or feel left out because they don't already have what some consider the requisite knowledge to be considered a fan. And that's where Welcome to Geektown comes in. Here you can ask your questions without feeling like a gatekeeper is calling you out for not yet being fully versed in every aspect of your new interest. I'm going to be doing a giveaway soon, and to enter you'll need to either share a Welcome to Geektown Facebook status or retweet one of my tweets at Geektown Podcast. So to get ready for that upcoming contest, be sure to follow me on both Facebook and Twitter to make sure you know when that gets started. Listener Aaron L. saw the trailer for the new Bloodshot movie starring Vin Diesel and wanted to know where Valiant Comics comes from and what sets it apart from Marvel and DC. Well, Aaron, Valiant Comics / Entertainment has gone through a number of iterations since its beginning in the early 90s. We'll go through those in chronological order to see the various rises and falls the company and its characters have gone through. We'll start at the very beginning, when former Marvel editor-in-chief Jim Shooter, after an unsuccessful attempt to purchase Marvel Comics itself in 1988, decided to form his own company called Voyager Communications and the subsidiary Valiant Comics. First, building some capital by published licensed comics, mostly based on Nintendo video game properties like Super Mario Bros. And The Legend of Zelda, in 1991, Jim and his team started publishing the superhero universe that they had always wanted to make. That team primarily consisted of Shooter himself, along with former Iron Man artist Bob Layton and legendary writer-artist Barry Windsor Smith, probably best known for the Weapon X storyline detailing how Wolverine got his adamantium skeleton, as well as his classic run on Savage Sword of Conan. Some other names that later became big also participated in early Valiant books, including Joe Quesada, which means that at one point both the past and future editor-in-chief of Marvel Comics were working at Valiant. To help garner attention to this new publishing venture, the first few books in the line came from acquiring the rights to characters published in the 1960s by Gold Key Comics. This includes Magnus Robot Fighter, Dr. Solar, Man of the Atom, and Turok, Son of Stone, which Valiant titled Turok, Dinosaur Hunter. These were not continuations of those older stories, but shared much of the look and characterization, which brought the old fans into comic book stores, along with the usual batch of speculators that were present during the early 1990s, which made the launch reasonably successful. This allowed the Valiant team to introduce new characters and titles, which included Japanese hero Rai, Teen Team Harbinger, time-displaced Exo Manowar, and the nanite-powered Bloodshot. One of the mandates for the Valiant line was to keep things as grounded as possible. While obviously that's not something that can be 100% adhered to in a world with superheroes, Shooter and the rest did what they could to make everything science-based and at least somewhat realistic, using future science like the aforementioned nanites, or alien technology which powered the Exo Manowar suit. Magic was not allowed in Shooter's vision. Like any connected universe, during this introductory period, characters would appear in each other's books, but in August of 1992, we got the first big crossover for Valiant Comics, which was called Unity. Shooter came up with a unique gimmick at the time to get new readers involved. The first chapter of the story, Unity number 0, was given away for free at comic stores. This was 10 years before Free Comic Book Day became an annual industry-wide event. And the giveaway worked, increasing sales on new Valiant books, as well as demand for the back issues that had introduced the characters in the storyline. Both readers and retailers were overall happy with the company. Unfortunately, Valiant's next crossover did not go nearly as well. Around the same time Valiant was getting started, another comic book company was also beginning its history. This was Image Comics. Image was a collective of some of the biggest artists in the industry at the time, each working on their own book or books with their own storyline. Unlike Valiant's tight continuity starting from the vision of its singular editor-in-chief. By this time, Jim Shooter had left for reasons that varied depending on who's telling the tale. He was replaced by Bob Layton. Occasionally, a character from one Image creator would appear in a different creator's book, but they were not in one big shared universe. Despite those differences, Valiant and Image decided to work together on a crossover called Deathmate. The idea was that each of the 4 books, Deathmate Red, Black, Yellow, and Blue, would be a standalone issue, not requiring the others be read, with only a prologue and epilogue tying all 4 together. Valiant published the prologue, as well as the yellow and blue issues of the Deathmate crossover, with Image taking control of Deathmate Red and Black, in addition to the epilogue. The issues that Valiant published came out in a timely manner, but Image's books were plagued by delays, with Deathmate Red actually being released after the epilogue had come out. With almost 6 months between the promised ship date and its release, most readers had lost interest, and collectors were beginning to see the bubble burst in the comics market. The books came out just under the wire of being returnable, which means that the retailers who had ordered big on this crossover now had to absorb the cost of all of these unsold books. The Deathmate crossover is now seen as one of the death knells of the comic book boom, and the beginning of the bust that sadly led to many stores and smaller comic book companies going out of business. And despite Image being the company that was responsible for the late books, it was mostly Valiant that ended up feeling the repercussions. Just a few months after the Deathmate debacle, Valiant was sold to Acclaim Entertainment, a video game publisher. The new owners wanted the properties to use in their video games, and asked that the characters be changed in ways that made them more video game friendly. In a story called Birthquake, retcons were put in place, and some titles were cancelled, with the more popular books going to a twice-a-month schedule to increase overall sales. Turok Dinosaur Hunter was the most successful in transitioning to this new medium, as it was altered very little from its original concept, but for most of the other books, comic readers were not happy with their favorite characters having their stories altered to fit the ideas of the video game developers. Sales dwindled on the ongoing titles, and by 1996, the first run of Valiant Comics came to an end, with Exo Manowar number 68 being the final issue of this version of the Valiant universe. However, Acclaim wanted to continue publishing these properties and decided to reboot the universe entirely. Fabian Nicieza was hired as the new editor-in-chief, and he brought in a ton of the most popular and acclaimed writers and artists of the time to introduce the new versions of these characters. Starting with a Solar Man of the Atom one-shot by writer Warren Ellis and artist Derek Robertson, who would go on to collaborate on the brilliant Transmetropolitan series highlighted in episode 36. Some of the other writers and artists that were involved include Kurt Busiek, Mark Waid, Garth Ennis, Mike McCone, Ashley Wood, Sean Chen, and Kevin Maguire, among others. I'll admit, this is, quote-unquote, my version of Valiant Comics. The creative teams involved were ones that I already counted among my favorites, and I found the new takes on these concepts to be fun and unique. For instance, instead of being a British spy, Ninjak was now a teen transformed into his favorite video game character after discovering a secret Easter egg. Instead of the time-displaced barbarian, the Exo Manowar armor was now worn by a somewhat cowardly scientist who bonded with the alien armor after the Special Forces soldier intended to be the recipient died on his first mission. New characters, like the teenage team known as the Troublemakers, were also created as part of this new launch. One of my personal favorite books of all time came from this period, with Christopher Priest and M.D. Bright creating the world's worst superhero team of Quantum and Woody, which was quite popular with both readers and critics. I talk a little about this book in the Fourth Wall Breaking episode 8 of Welcome to Geektown. Unfortunately, trade paperbacks for most of the books involved in this VH2 universe, the nickname of the Valiant Heroes relaunch, are not in print, so you're going to have a hard time locating any of these mid-90s books, but if you do find them, I highly recommend giving them a read. By this point, the overall comic book market was in a fairly steep fall, and many of the book's top-tier talent had left after the first year or so and handed the titles off to lesser-known, though still talented, names. So sales on most of the books were insufficient to justify continuing publication. Acclaim tried one more time to reignite interest in the books, bringing back Jim Shooter to write a story titled Unity 2000, which would tie together the original Valiant universe, or VH1, to the VH2. However, Acclaim was in financial trouble and was unable to ship the entire miniseries, with only 3 of the 6 planned issues ever appearing on shelves. If you're curious as to how it would have ended up, you can find a plot breakdown on Jim Shooter's website. I'll include a link in the show notes. For a few years, the Valiant brand lay fallow, as Acclaim focused on the video game industry. When Acclaim declared bankruptcy in 2004, the rights to the original Valiant characters went up for sale, while the Gold Key comic character rights reverted back to Classic Media, who has since sold those rights to DreamWorks. In 2005, 2 fans named Dinesh Shamdasani and Jason Kathari were able to raise enough money to purchase the rights to the Valiant properties and created a new company, appropriately titled Valiant Entertainment. Starting in 2007, they put out hardcover reprints of the older Valiant stories, with new short stories written by Jim Shooter to supplement the material. Finally, in 2012, they announced they would start publishing new monthly comics, starting with Exo Manowar, Harbinger, Bloodshot, and Archer and Armstrong. These stories hewed much closer to the VH1 version of the Valiant universe, rather than the VH2, although in 2013 they added Quantum and Woody to their list of ongoing titles. With this new company, the Valiant universe has been going strong for the last 7 years, and as evidenced from the question that started this whole episode, is now starting to be adapted into film projects. The first such project was actually a web series released in spring of 2018 called Ninjak vs. the Valiant Universe, which you can find on YouTube. This series featured the titular character, played by Michael Rowe, best known by Arrowverse fans for playing the DC villain Deadshot, fighting heroes and villains alike, including Archer and Armstrong, Exo Manowar, and Bloodshot, played by the original White Power Ranger, David Jason Frank. The Bloodshot movie, starring Vin Diesel, is set to come out early next year, and announcements have been made regarding potential adaptations of both the team title Harbinger, as well as a potential solo movie about Faith, the plus-size telekinetic member of the Harbinger team. Although its universe has been rebooted a few times now, in each iteration, Valiant has been one of the few comic publishers outside of Marvel and DC that keeps most of their titles in the same universe with a tight rein on continuity. Which means that one day down the road, we could be talking about a VCU right along with the MCU and DCEU films. But in the meantime, there are quite a few Valiant comics out there for you to read and enjoy, if what you've heard sounds interesting to you. So that's a basic overview of Valiant as a company and some of its creations. But there's still a lot that could be covered. Is there anything more specific you'd like to know? Or do you have a completely unrelated question about comics, board games, sci-fi, fantasy, or any other geeky subject? If so, please send me an email at welcometogeektown@gmail.com. Or ask your question anonymously if you prefer, by clicking Submit a Question at www.welcome2, the number 2 in this case, geektown.com. Other contact options include facebook.com/welcometogeektown or Twitter @geektownpodcast. Also, if you'd like to support the show directly, come join the Patreon at patreon.com/welcometogeektown for just $1 per month to get access to full scripts of the shows, outtakes, and a monthly shoutout. You can also help the show grow by subscribing and giving a 5-star review over on Apple Podcasts to join the Geektown City Council, which helps other people find the show, so we can all tell them, welcome to Geektown, population, us. Welcome to Geektown is written, narrated, edited, and produced by me, Kurt Onstead. Theme music is by Aaron Levitz, logo art by Archie Santana. All other sound clips are the copyrighted material of their respective owners, and no infringement is intended, falling under fair use.